Hi, I'm Audrey. My sister stood up at my wedding and screamed she was pregnant with my fiance's child. But that wasn't the part that broke me. What hurt most? My mother already knew. They planned it together, right down to replacing my name on the invitations. They moved money behind my back, erased me from my own wedding, even edited me out of the photos. And the whole time, they smiled like nothing was wrong. How do you survive a betrayal that was choreographed by your own family? Do you walk away? Or do you make sure they remember who you were before they tried to rewrite you? The light coming through the kitchen window had that warm, buttery glow Savannah was famous for. It should have comforted me. Instead, it made the silence in the house more pronounced. There wasn't a single clatter, no hum of the old AC, not even the click of heels from Roxalana, who'd usually already be stomping around looking for her phone. You'd think a house buzzing with wedding prep would feel alive, but mine felt paused, like someone had hit mute on the soundtrack of my life. I stood in my robe, stirring coffee I didn't plan to drink. My planner was open on the island counter, pages decorated with sticky notes and highlighted timelines. I'd poured so much into this wedding. Budget spreadsheets that ran 12 tabs deep. Email threads longer than my last relationship. Every flower, fork, and photo booth had been chosen with precision. And yet, as I glanced at the checklist, it didn't feel like I was building a future. It felt like I was managing someone else's event. I glanced at the couch where my sister had napped the night before. The throw blanket was folded too neatly. That's when I noticed it. The way the air felt too finished, like someone had tidied up just a little too thoroughly. I headed upstairs to grab my hairbrush before leaving for the venue walkthrough. The guest bathroom was down the hall, Roxalana's unofficial second bedroom since she started staying over to help. I pushed open the door. At first glance, nothing was off. Towels hung perfectly, the soap dispenser was full, and the orchid on the shelf hadn't dropped a single petal. But there, near the edge of the marble counter, was a smudge, a faint reddish streak across the tissue box. I leaned closer. Lipstick? Maybe. But it looked too thin. I pulled a tissue and dabbed it, still wet. Blood. I looked in the trash. Beneath some tissues and a cotton pad was a crumpled foil wrapper. I reached for it slowly, heart beating a little faster. A pregnancy test. Empty. Just the wrapper. But the kind I hadn't bought. I stood in that bathroom far too long, staring into the trash like it would speak. Then my mind started moving. A week ago, Roxalana mentioned feeling nauseous all the time, brushing it off as stress. She'd been lingering around the house more, always offering to help Ilaria with the wine list or coordinate with the planner in my place. No, I said to myself. That's insane. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. Back downstairs, I grabbed my keys but hesitated at the door. My purse was on the counter, open. My phone buzzed with a reminder about cake tasting this afternoon. I canceled it with a swipe. On the drive to the venue, I couldn't focus. Every song on the radio irritated me. Every red light felt personal. When I finally parked, I didn't get out right away. Instead, I opened my email to check on the digital album preview the photographer promised. At least this would feel normal. Click, load. A scroll. The cover was beautiful. Sunlight behind Ilario and me as we held hands on the front porch. But then I flipped to the third page. One of my favorite shots, me sitting on the window ledge in my bridal dress test fitting, had been altered. My face was blurred. Roxalana, standing to the side, adjusting my train, was crystal clear. I scrolled faster. 2 more shots. Same thing. I looked like a soft focus ghost. My sister looked like the star. I messaged the photographer. Hey, I think there's been a mistake with the preview. My face is blurred in some of the key shots. He replied instantly. Oh, your sister asked me to edit those for the preview version. Said you two agreed. We did not. My stomach twisted. Roxalana hadn't just been inserting herself into my space. She was editing me out of it. I locked my phone and sat in the driver's seat, numb. In families, I whispered to no one, sometimes we're so used to the loudest person being the center, we don't realize someone's trying to push us out entirely. I tried to laugh, but it came out dry. By the time I got home, it was dark. I stepped inside quietly, like I was afraid of being caught in my own house. Roxalana wasn't there. A text on the fridge said she'd gone to a late dinner with friends. I didn't ask who. I poured a glass of water, then put it back untouched. I sat at the table, opened my journal, and stared at the blank page. I thought about writing everything, the test, the photos, the blurred face, but instead, I wrote one line. If I'm not the bride in this house, who is? The pen lingered in my hand. Growing up, Mom always told me, "You're the calm one. Let your sister have her moment." And I had, over and over. Let her have the last word, the spotlight, the stage. But the aisle, that was mine. Maybe I was just stressed. Maybe these were coincidences, overlapping at the worst possible time. Or maybe this was the first crack in something much bigger, and it had been waiting to burst. Later that night, I cleaned up the kitchen, tossed receipts, folded a napkin someone left behind. Then I saw it. A small white slip in the trash, half covered by a banana peel. I pulled it out. A cafe receipt. Lavender and Lace Coffee House. That was across town, near Ilario's apartment. The name on the order, Roxalana Wellington. My hands froze. That's not her last name. Yet, the air in the restaurant felt heavier than usual, even with the scent of fried green tomatoes and sweet tea floating through the room. This wasn't just any family dinner. It was the rehearsal dinner. The kind of gathering where people smile too much, where stories are retold not because they're funny, but because they've always been safe. I sat at the long mahogany table, listening to the clinks of silverware and the hum of chatter, my glass of iced tea untouched. When my name was called to give a toast, I stood slowly, clutching my note cards with a rehearsed grip. I had planned to say something sincere, maybe even heartfelt. Something about how love isn't just about the big moments, it's about showing up when it's inconvenient. I opened my mouth, got through the first 3 lines, then caught my mother waving discreetly from across the table. She pointed, gently but clearly, at Roxalana. "She can help finish it," she mouthed. I froze. Before I could respond, Roxalana stood with a radiant smile and effortlessly picked up where I left off, weaving a story about sisterhood and learning from each other. The table erupted in polite laughter and nods. She closed with a line I had originally written, "To love that makes us braver," and raised her glass as if it had always belonged to her. I smiled too, because what else was I supposed to do? Applause followed, but not for me. The silence in my chest, though, was deafening. Later that night, back at the house, I replayed the moment over and over. Not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. Ilario hadn't looked at me once during that toast. Neither had Dad. And Mom had smiled as if handing off my moment was an act of mercy. The next morning, as I brewed coffee, I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was just nerves. Until I watched Roxalana walk up behind Ilario and casually adjust his tie in the foyer. "You never could tie this right," she laughed softly, smoothing the knot with her fingers. Ilario didn't flinch. He let her. Dad chuckled from the armchair. Mom offered an approving nod from the kitchen. They acted like it was normal, like this was just how things worked. But I remembered, clearly, the first time I tied Ilario's tie, our second date. He'd worn a navy suit, and his fingers trembled as he fumbled with the silk. I had stepped closer, my hands brushing his collarbone as I tied it for him. He had kissed my forehead after. Watching Roxalana do the same, in our home, in front of our parents, Felt like someone taking a snapshot of my memory and scribbling their name over it. I didn't say anything. Instead, I watched, quietly, closely. The mail came around noon. A small stack of flyers, a bridal magazine, and a single envelope addressed to me from an insurance provider. I almost tossed it, until I saw the subject line: confirmation of prenatal consultation. I paused, sat down, opened it. Inside was a summary of a medical visit to a women's health clinic across town, under my name, my address, but a different social security number. My stomach tightened. I called the provider. "Hi, I think there's been a mix-up," I said, keeping my voice level. "You've listed a prenatal visit under my account, but I didn't make that appointment." After a pause and verification steps, the representative said, "Looks like this was made using your insurance, but the ID doesn't fully match. Must have been an error on our side. Do you want to dispute it formally?" No, I didn't want to dispute it. I wanted to confirm what I already suspected. I called Mom. She picked up after 2 rings. "Hey, sweetheart." "Hi. Did you use my insurance for anything recently? Maybe for Roxalana?" There was a pause. Then her tone shifted. Not guilty, not defensive, just condescending. "I did. She needed to be seen quickly, and you have great coverage." "I didn't think you'd mind." "Mom, that's fraud. It's family, and you've always been the stable one. I knew you'd understand." I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have words, but because I was starting to understand all too well. They weren't cutting me out of convenience. They were doing it because they assumed I didn't need to be included, that I'd be fine either way. Sometimes families don't even realize they're erasing you. They just think they're maintaining peace. I ended the call with a short, "I've got to go." Then I sat there in silence, the paper still in my hand. Over the next few days, the signs only grew louder. I began to notice the pattern I had chosen not to see. Roxalana was always around, but only when I wasn't. I'd come home to find 2 coffee cups on the counter and a scarf that wasn't mine on the arm of the couch. Ilario would shrug. She dropped by. Wanted to check on the seating chart. One afternoon, I overheard my mom on the phone saying, "Ilario's such a great addition to our family, not to our lives, not to my life, ours, hers, Roxalana's. It would have been easier to just blow up, to scream or accuse, but I didn't. Instead, I started documenting everything: photos, screenshots, receipts, notes in my journal, the behavioral shifts, the way Ilario smiled differently when Roxalana walked into the room, the way she always knew what I was planning before I told anyone. There's a difference between being polite and being naive. I'd been both, but not anymore. When you stop doubting your gut, the truth doesn't just surprise you. It confirms what your silence already knew. By the time I made it up to the attic, I was mostly just trying to stay busy. Cassiopeia was arriving in a couple of hours, and I wanted the guest room to be perfect. Fresh sheets, an extra phone charger by the bed, even her favorite candle on the nightstand. It was a small act of control in a week that had felt like someone else was driving my life in reverse. I opened a box that had accidentally been brought down from storage. I recognized the handwriting on the side immediately, mine, from high school, complete with little hearts over the eyes. I was planning to shove it aside until something caught my eye. A black leather-bound notebook tucked beside my old sketchbooks. I knew that journal, not because it was mine, but because it used to belong to Roxalana. I held it like it was fragile. There was a time when we shared everything: clothes, secrets, even crushes. That was before competition crept in like a draft under a locked door. The journal smelled faintly of vanilla and old pencil shavings. I sat down, cross-legged on the hardwood floor, heart thumping. Was it wrong to read it? Probably. But then again, if she was rewriting my life, I had every right to remember hers. I opened it. The first few pages were full of teenage ramblings, grades, outfits, mild complaints about our mother. Then I reached an entry dated March 17th, junior year of college. That date stopped me cold. That was the night I met Ilario. According to Roxalana's entry, she'd met him 2 weeks before, at a student mixer. She wrote about how handsome he was, how he remembered her name the second time they met. She described him as the kind of guy who listens and leans in, not away. And then I read the part that changed everything. I introduced him to Audrey at the party tonight. She laughed at his jokes. He looked at her like she was sunlight. I should have stayed quiet. I should have let him stay mine. I blinked, reread it, and felt like I was inhaling smoke. She always wins by accident. I always lose on purpose. Let them think I'm the good sister. Someday they'll see. I closed the journal slowly, letting the words settle inside me like sediment in a glass of water. The betrayal hadn't begun this month, or last month. It had been blooming quietly for years, fed by resentment, masked as family affection. Some people don't just carry grudges. They raise them like children. That evening, I found Roxalana in the kitchen, boiling water for tea, like nothing in the world was burning. She was humming. I leaned against the fridge, arms crossed, and just watched her for a second. She finally glanced at me, lifting an eyebrow. What? Were you ever going to tell me you loved him first? Her hand stilled over the kettle, but she didn't look away. I didn't lose him. You borrowed him. My breath caught. Borrowed? She stirred her tea as if we were discussing weekend plans. You knew I liked him. You always knew. But you stepped in, and he chose you. Just like always. He didn't choose me because I stepped in, Roxalana. He chose me because he liked who I was. She smiled, sharp and tired. You think that matters now? I held up the journal. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You're going through my things now? Didn't need to. It was boxed with mine. She shrugged, unfazed. That was college. Teenage drama. Let it go. You don't sound sorry. I'm not, she said plainly. You're just the version of me Mom and Dad learned to settle for. I didn't respond, because anything I said would only feed her pride. So I turned and walked out. In my room, I pulled out the folder I'd labeled Evidence. Up until now, it had only contained notes, fragments, screenshots. But tonight, I added real fire. The journal entry, dated and written in her own hand. I opened my laptop and began drafting a timeline. Dates, inconsistencies, patterns. I wasn't gathering this to start a war. I was preparing because someone else already had. She wanted a war. I wanted peace. But if peace meant surrendering my place at the table, maybe I was born to flip the damn table over. I set a calendar reminder before I shut my laptop. Upload everything to cloud backup, just in case. At 11:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. No name, just an image. Roxalana and Ilario. At a bar I didn't recognize. Her hand on his thigh. His face leaned close to hers, eyes soft. The photo was dated last Saturday. I had been at my dress fitting. A caption accompanied the photo. Check your guest list again. I stared at the screen. When betrayal shows up, it never travels alone. Cassiopeia dropped me off around 2:15 that afternoon. We'd had brunch at our usual spot. Eggs Benedict for her, avocado toast for me, and a mimosa neither of us touched because our conversation was too sobering. She'd noticed it too. The glances, the way Roxalana always redirected conversations to herself, even when they started with me. I appreciated Cassiopeia for not saying, "I told you so," even though she'd hinted for weeks. I walked up the front steps, arms full of leftover pastries and a little bouquet Cass had insisted I take. The moment I saw the box on the porch, my stomach dipped like I'd missed a step. Big, white, wrapped with a silver ribbon, and a card taped neatly on top. To our future. From us. There was no return address. I hesitated before picking it up. It was light. Too light for what I'd assumed. A gift from the caterer or something from the planner. I carried it inside, placed it on the coffee table, and pulled the ribbon. The paper peeled away easily, like it wanted to be discovered. Inside, 2 white robes lay folded side by side, embroidered in gold thread. R plus I, Roxalana, Ilario, not A plus I, not me. I didn't cry. My hands shook a little, but it wasn't anger, it was clarity. Pure, cold, irrefutable. The door creaked open behind me. Mom walked in, holding a bag of groceries, her keys jingling. She saw the box immediately. "Oh," she said, setting her things down slowly. "They must have delivered it here by mistake." I turned, holding up the tag. No return address. And this, I held out the monogrammed robe, doesn't feel like a mistake. She looked at the gift, then at me, her expression shifting into that familiar maternal calm, equal parts dismissal and defense. "Don't read into it, Audrey. It's probably just a mix-up from the vendor. You know how wedding orders get." I stared. "And the card?" She waved a hand. "Maybe Ilario tried to surprise you and gave the wrong initials." Men don't think these things through. I should have stopped there, but I couldn't. "Did you approve Roxalana using my insurance for her appointment?" Her lips tightened. She needed help. She didn't have coverage, and the clinic was time-sensitive. "So you didn't think to ask me? Tell me?" "I knew you wouldn't say no," she replied, as if that made it better. "You've always been the strong one." "Roxalana, she's fragile. She needs more from us." I shook my head. "You keep saying that. You treat her mistakes like emergencies, and mine like expectations." Mom's face softened, but her words didn't. "You've always been fine on your own. That's not a bad thing." It felt like being handed a participation ribbon at your own betrayal. "When you're the daughter who holds it all together," I whispered more to myself than to her, "people forget to hold you at all." She didn't respond, just picked up her bags and went to the kitchen like the conversation was over. Later that day, I found myself standing in my father's home office. He wasn't home. I'd come by to pick up an old family photo he promised me, something to display at the reception. The desk was cluttered with papers, but one folder was open, a draft of the family trust. I froze when I saw Roxalana's name next to mine, not under, next to co-beneficiary. I remembered this file. Weeks ago, Dad had told me he was finalizing updates. I'd assumed, foolishly it seemed, that I was still the sole beneficiary. He had told me that before. We'd discussed it. But now, there it was in black ink. At the time, I convinced myself it was a clerical error. I didn't ask, didn't question, because I wanted to believe that some parts of this family still saw me clearly. But today, with a robe stitched with someone else's initials in my lap, I saw it for what it was. She wasn't just rewriting my story, she was re-signing my legacy. I scheduled a meeting with Dad for the following morning. No texts, no vague invitations. A real calendar event. He welcomed me in with his usual firm handshake, guiding me to the leather armchairs across from his desk. I handed him a folder, my own, meticulously assembled. Inside were copies of recent financial transactions, photos of the robes, the note, a printed scan of the journal entry I'd read just days ago. He glanced through it in silence, flipping each page without comment. I spoke first. "Dad, I'm not here to ask for validation. I'm not even here to demand anything. I just want you to see what's happening. and decide whether you're going to pretend not to. He looked up. I didn't authorize the trust change. That draft must have come from your mother's side. I nodded. Even if you didn't sign it, someone did. Someone made sure her name was there, and I didn't find out until now. He sighed, a long, tired sound. I'll look into it. I stood. Take your time. But understand something. If I disappear from the photos and the paperwork, don't expect me to still be there at the table. He didn't stop me as I walked out. That night, back home, I was responding to vendor emails when a new message popped up. From the wedding planner. But it was addressed to Roxalana. Apparently, someone had forwarded it to me by mistake. Subject, updated seating chart with your revised bridal party notes. I clicked the attachment. There was a table, simple and neatly formatted. Columns for names, roles, table numbers. My name was there. Under guest. Not bride, not even maid of honor. Just Audrey. Table 7. They weren't planning a wedding with me. They were planning one without me. The cafe patio was quiet that morning, the kind of overcast day where even the birds seemed hesitant to sing. Cassiopeia stirred her tea with the grace of someone about to ruin your life, but still wanted you to like her afterward. I sipped my coffee and waited. Something was off. The way she wouldn't meet my eyes, the way her hands hovered around her napkin but never touched it. I need to talk to you about something, she finally said, her voice low. I smiled gently, pretending not to brace myself. Go ahead. She hesitated, then looked straight at me. I'm stepping down. From the wedding. I blinked. What? I'm stepping down as your maid of honor. A silence fell between us, as solid and sharp as a dropped glass. I set down my cup, forcing my voice to stay calm. Did something happen? She exhaled, folding her napkin with care. Audrey, I love you. You know I do. But this whole thing, it doesn't feel like your wedding anymore. It feels like a performance. One that someone else is directing. Roxalana, I said flatly. She said some things during the bridal prep session, things that made me question the whole dynamic. And honestly, the way your mom treats you during these meetings, it's like they're all reading from the same script. I wanted to argue. I wanted to defend what little control I still believed I had, but I didn't. Instead, I nodded once and asked, Who's replacing you? She didn't answer, but I already knew. After she left, I sat in my car and let the silence wrap around me like a thick blanket. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I just stared out the windshield and replayed the past few weeks like they were a movie I hadn't realized I was only a side character in. People weren't backing away from me because I'd done something wrong. They were moving out of Roxalana's path. One by one, Mom, Ilario, now Cassiopeia. This wasn't just about a wedding, it was about being edited out of my own story. Growing up, Mom used to say, You've always been the one who adjusted. Roxalana's the one who needs center stage. I used to wear that as a badge of honor. Now it felt like a noose. That night, I couldn't sleep. I logged into the joint wedding planning account, hoping to distract myself by confirming vendor deposits. Something productive, something I could control. What I found made me grip the edges of the keyboard. A $3,200 charge from 3 days ago, boutique jewelry store, located across town. My cursor hovered over the receipt. There was a SKU number. I copied it and ran a quick search. It was a necklace. White gold. Delicate. Minimalist. I'd seen it. Roxalana wore it yesterday during our lunch with the florist. She'd made a point to tuck her hair behind her ear 3 times. My hands felt numb as I called the store. I didn't introduce myself as Audrey. I used Ilario's name. Hi, I'm following up on a recent purchase, I said evenly. There's a charge that came through. I just want to make sure it went through correctly. Oh, yes, the clerk said brightly. It was such a thoughtful gift. For the maid of honor, right? He said it was a family gesture. I barely remembered ending the call, but I did remember sitting in that chair and realizing I wasn't just paying for the wedding. I was funding my own betrayal. The next morning, I texted Ilario and asked him to meet me for brunch. I chose a neutral spot, public, open, impossible to scream in. I wore a simple dress and brought no expectations. He arrived 10 minutes late, wearing the same navy blazer he wore on our first date. I wondered if he even realized it. "Hey," he said, sliding into the booth. "Hi," I replied, folding my napkin slowly. We ordered. Small talk followed. I asked about work. He asked if the baker confirmed the fondant texture. It was all so ordinary. I almost forgot why we were there. Almost. When the drinks arrived, I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope. I slid it across the table without a word. He opened it. Inside, a printout of the jewelry transaction, a photo of Roxalana wearing the necklace, and a note in my handwriting. "Consider this my final silent expense." He looked up, startled. "Audrey, this isn't—" "I noticed your taste in jewelry has changed," I said, my voice calm but unmistakably final. "And apparently, so has your loyalty." He opened his mouth again, but I stood before he could speak. "You don't owe me a performance," I added, grabbing my bag, "and I don't owe you an explanation." I left him sitting there, the envelope in one hand and guilt in the other. That night, as I was winding down, my phone buzzed. A message from our wedding photographer. "Hey Audrey, just confirming, should we switch Cassiopeia's name to Roxalana's as maid of honor in the photo list?" I didn't reply. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. She wasn't replacing my bridesmaid, she was replacing my position entirely. The bridal shop was quiet when I arrived, almost too quiet, like a stage before the lights go up. I walked through the glass door, the bell above it offering a polite chime that felt too cheery for how my stomach twisted. The stylist met me with a nervous smile. "Oh, Audrey, good timing. Roxalana just tried on the gown so we could pin the waistline." My gown. I looked past her into the fitting area. There she was, seated like royalty in the bride's chair, legs crossed, sipping from a bottle of sparkling water while chatting with the tailor like she'd done this before. She wasn't in her dress anymore, but the fact she'd been in it at all. I kept my expression still, nodding slowly. "Right. Thank you. Hope you don't mind," the stylist added too quickly, sensing the tension. "She said you asked her to come ahead of time." Of course she did. I changed quickly, not speaking. When I emerged in the dress, it didn't feel like mine. It felt borrowed, occupied. Like someone else's perfume lingered in it. I turned to the mirror, adjusted the neckline. I came to be a bride. I left wondering if I was just an extra in their production. That evening, I showed up at my own bridal shower with a smile practiced in the car mirror. People I barely knew gave hugs too long, compliments too loud. My mother kept repeating, "Doesn't she look radiant?" As if trying to convince someone, maybe herself. They handed me the mic near the cake table. I'd prepared a short thank you speech, something gracious, heartfelt. I held it in one hand, ready to speak, but as I opened my mouth, Roxalana slid in beside me and snatched the mic with a laugh. "I know Audrey's too modest to say it," she began, flashing her teeth, "but this wedding means the world to all of us, especially our family." I stood frozen, smile intact, words caged in my throat. She went on, praising my kindness, my calm nature. Then, her tone softened. "We all make mistakes, right? But it's in forgiving each other that we grow. That's what Audrey has taught me. Grace under pressure." Heads nodded. My mother dabbed her eyes. She didn't just steal the mic. She rewrote the narrative while I stood there holding my breath. I stepped off to the side, still clapping when she ended with a toast that wasn't hers to give. No one noticed the shift. After the event, I slipped into the powder room and locked the door. I stared at myself in the mirror. My lipstick had faded. There was a smudge on my cheek from a hug I didn't want. I sat on the toilet lid and let my hands tremble. No tears, just a deep ache. I thought back to second grade, the school poetry contest. I'd written a piece about thunderstorms and paper boats. The night before the assembly, Roxalana asked to read it for fun. The next day, she stood on stage reciting it line for line, claiming it as her own. Everyone applauded. My teacher called her brilliant, and I sat in the front row, clapping, because I'd been told not to make a scene. You grow up thinking kindness is self-erasure until you see yourself fading. I stood up, reapplied my lipstick, fixed the smudge, and adjusted my dress. Then I walked out, head high. No more reacting. Now I strategize. Back home, I opened the master guest list. I studied it carefully. Names blurred by time, connections tangled in loyalty. Then I got to work. I cross-referenced every guest. Anyone Roxalana invited without consulting me went first. Then came the ones who had made side remarks, taken her calls, laughed too loudly at her speeches. 12 names gone. I didn't announce it. I didn't justify it. I sent the revised list to the planner with a simple note. Please print place cards based on this latest version. This is final. If they can exclude me emotionally, I can exclude them physically. That night, while finishing a final note to the baker, my phone buzzed. A voicemail. Dad? His voice was tighter than usual, measured. Your sister says you embarrassed her tonight. I'd appreciate if we didn't have another scene like that before the big day. I sat in the dark, phone still in hand. I closed my eyes, took a deep breath. There won't be another scene, I whispered aloud, voice steady. There'll be a finale. The sound of my phone buzzing pulled me from a half-sleep haze. I reached for it, expecting another vendor reminder or message from the planner. Instead, it was a series of Instagram notifications. My name had been tagged in a story. I clicked through and felt my heart stall. It was from Roxalana's close friends list, but clearly made public by mistake. Or maybe not. The photo was from the bridal shower, a cropped image of me mid-laugh, unflattering and poorly lit. The caption underneath burned like a brand. The placeholders still smiling, for now. Below it, a string of laughing emojis and hearts. I stared at the screen long after the story disappeared. Nothing spreads faster than staged sincerity, except proof of it. I didn't respond. Not to her. Not to anyone. Later that morning, I walked into the final layout meeting with the wedding planner. We were surrounded by color swatches, table cards, and boxed candles for the reception. She greeted me with a warm, albeit tight-lipped smile. I have the final seating chart here, she said, unfolding a spreadsheet and sliding it toward me. And we just printed the name cards. Want to take a look? I scanned the first few names. Cousins, extended family, vendors. Then I found mine. Guest. Audrey L. My throat went dry. A few rows down, printed in gold script. Bride. Roxalana. Excuse me, I said, pointing to the card. This is incorrect. The planner's smile faltered. Oh, these were based on the edits we received last night. I assumed they came from you. Or, well, someone on your team. My team? I excused myself before my voice could crack. In the hallway, I paced the length of the building twice before stepping outside into the warm air. I didn't cry. I didn't scream, because I finally understood. They replaced me on paper because they couldn't erase me in person. That evening, the family dinner at my parents' home was meant to be a celebration. Just a relaxing evening, my mother had promised. No drama, no formality, just family. The table was overflowing with roasted chicken, vegetables, pitchers of sweet tea, Laughter rolled around like smoke. Roxalana took center stage again as she regaled the room with stories from wedding planning. "Remember when the florist accidentally called me the bride and we all laughed?" she giggled. "Maybe it wasn't such a mistake, huh?" I clenched my fork. No one said a word to counter her. Finally, my mother turned to me, her voice light but loaded. "You've been so quiet, Audrey. Roxalana's really stepping up as the family's bride." I didn't reply. Instead, I reached into my bag, pulled out the name cards I'd brought from the planner's office, and placed them in the center of the table. Silence. I stood slowly, met every eye at the table, and said, "Is this what stepping up looks like? Or is it just stepping over?" Then I opened my phone, turned the screen to face the room, played the video, Roxalana's voice giggling, the placeholders still smiling. "For now." My mother covered her mouth. Mahola put his fork down. "Roxalana?" She didn't look surprised, just annoyed that I'd said it out loud. No yelling followed, no dramatic outbursts, just airless tension. I left dinner before dessert. On the drive home, I didn't go to my apartment. I drove straight to the venue, parked, walked up the gravel path with my heels clicking like punctuation. I spoke to the front desk, asked for the coordinator. "I need to make a change to the bridal suite reservation," I said, voice calm. They pulled up the file. "I want to cancel the shared suite with my sister," I said, "and I'd like to reserve the private suite in the south wing, just for myself." "Of course," the woman replied, eyes darting to the name on the file. "No one else needs to know," I added. Not yet, because I wasn't retreating. I was preparing. You don't burn bridges when you plan to blow up the whole road. That night, just before midnight, my phone buzzed again. A text from Roxalana. "I know what you're doing, but remember who people trust more in this family." I didn't respond. I opened a new draft in my email. Subject, final guest list, confidential. The venue buzzed with half-hearted excitement. The family had gathered for what should have been a joyful rehearsal. Instead, it felt like a staged production for people pretending not to notice the understudy stealing the spotlight. I walked in to find my seat missing, literally. There was no card with my name at the bride's table, no place set for me next to Ilario. Instead, the cards had been rearranged to reflect a different story. "Just a mix-up," Ilario mumbled, adjusting his cufflinks without making eye contact. "I'll tell them to fix it." He didn't offer to move his own card. He didn't call for the planner. He just stood there. Roxalana, of course, was radiant, laughing, tossing her hair, taking selfies in the center aisle as if she'd been ordained by the venue itself. She twirled once, pausing just long enough to angle her phone for the perfect shot. "The lighting in this chapel is insane," she chirped. "So dreamy. It felt like watching a robbery in daylight while everyone pretended not to see." The pastor gathered everyone near the altar. "Let's begin with a moment of silence," he said, hands gently folded, "to center ourselves, to reflect on the sacred bond we're about to witness." A hush fell, and then Roxalana stood. She didn't just raise her voice. She projected. "I'm pregnant." Heads whipped around. My blood froze, but I stayed still. "And it's not just any man's child," she continued, smiling wide. "It's Ilario's." She waited, milking the silence. And Audrey knew it. The room gasped. One aunt dropped her clutch. A second cousin muttered, "Jesus." I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink, because I had expected it. It's wild how people think surprise equals victory, but I don't play chess with children. All eyes turned to me, some filled with pity, some with curiosity, a few with judgment. They waited for me to crumble. I walked to the front, slow, calm, certain. I took the mic from the pastor, who stepped back without question. I could feel Roxalana's eyes burning into my shoulder. I didn't look at her. "Thank you, Roxalana," I said, voice steady. "I've been waiting for you to say it out loud." I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, connected to the venue's Bluetooth speaker. Pressed play. Her voice filled the chapel, clear as a bell. "Audrey's so clueless, she'll still marry him. Then I'll have them both in my pocket." A ripple of murmurs, a few gasps, then more. "I mean, yeah, it's his baby. But honestly, I might still have a better shot at the trust fund if I stay close. Let her be the one holding the bouquet while I hold the real future." The room shifted. People moved in their chairs. Someone dropped a fork. My mother dropped her wine glass. I let the clip end, then turned to face the crowd. "The thing about being underestimated is," I said quietly, "people never prepare for your receipts." I walked to the altar, looked down at my ring. I took it off slowly, held it up between two fingers, and placed it on the edge of the floral arrangement. Then I looked back at them, at Ilario, at Roxalana, at my family. "I may not be the bride today," I said, "but I'm done being the victim in your fairy tale." No one moved. Even the pastor stayed frozen. I turned, adjusted my purse on my shoulder, and walked down the aisle. Each step lighter than the one before. They didn't steal my wedding. They freed me from a nightmare dressed in lace. Outside, the air was cool, quiet, honest. As I stepped into the parking lot, my phone buzzed. A text from Dad. "We need to talk. Not about them, about you." I stared at the screen, smiled. Finally. The next morning, I met my father at a quiet diner just off Victory Drive. We'd always come here when I was a kid. Grits, coffee, and silence. Today wasn't any different, except for the air between us. Heavy, unspoken, dense with history. He was already seated when I walked in, a black coffee in front of him, untouched. His eyes looked tired. Maybe they always had. Maybe I was just seeing them differently now. "Thanks for meeting," he said as I slid into the booth. I nodded. "Thanks for the text." He didn't waste time. Reached into his leather briefcase and pulled out a folder. Thick, heavy, full of truths that had been folded too neatly for too long. "Roxalana submitted these forms," he said, laying them flat. "Financial requests, updates to the joint account. She even signed off on a trust draft that wasn't approved by me." My name had been erased from several key lines. "She told the notary she was authorized," he added, voice low. I sat back, not shocked, but exhausted. "I thought staying out of it would keep peace," he said, finally meeting my eyes. "Turns out, silence only let the wrong voices grow louder." We didn't speak again for a while. The waitress came, poured coffee, and left without asking questions. I didn't need an apology. I needed clarity, and now I had it. When I stepped outside and returned to my car, there was an envelope tucked under my windshield wiper. No return address, just my name, written in block letters. Inside were 6 printed screenshots, messages between Ilario and someone named Ione. The timestamps were recent. In one, Ilario wrote, "She suspects nothing. Let her believe the wedding is still happening." Another, "She'll figure it out soon, but by then the account will be in my name." And worse, "Roxalana's an easy shield. Audrey's still the prize." I stood there, the paper trembling in my hands, but not from shock, from confirmation. This hadn't just been betrayal. This had been strategy. I forwarded the screenshots to Roxalana without a word. No caption, no explanation. Let the fire they built burn them both now. That evening, I attended what was supposed to be a casual pre-wedding family drop-in at my cousin's house. No decorations, no speeches, just casseroles and passive-aggressive potluck. I didn't make it 10 steps inside before my cousin Lena pulled me aside into the laundry room. "Some people think you're being dramatic," she said softly, "but I think you're being brave." I blinked. "You're the first person who said that." She shrugged. "I know how this family works. The one who stays quiet is the one who gets left behind." Word had spread, the rehearsal, the recording, the exit. Some family members gave me quick nods of support. Others avoided eye contact altogether. A few left early. Mom hadn't spoken to me since the chapel. Dad, however, started making calls. One by one, he called vendors, florist, caterer, DJ, put everything in my name, legally, fully, no more shared contracts, no more loopholes. "Sometimes," he said, almost to himself, "to protect tradition, you have to break the ones that were lies all along." Later that night, I returned to my apartment. It didn't feel like home, but it was mine. That was enough. I pulled out the wedding binder. Not to resurrect anything, but to study it, to build a case, receipts, email threads, contracts, timelines. My bedroom looked like a detective's war room. I placed colored tabs on photos, numbered notes, labeled everything. Then I whispered, "I won't let them walk into this ceremony thinking they've won." I logged into my cloud drive and uploaded everything. Labeled the folder, Truth, Wedding Edition. As I zipped up my laptop bag, a new email notification popped up. From the wedding planner. Subject line, "Quick confirmation. Who should the officiant call forward as the bride?" I sat there staring at the screen before typing slowly, "Audrey Lee." Then, just before clicking send, I smiled. Let's make sure no one forgets whose name is on the invitation. I woke up before the sun. No buzzing phone, no knocking from bridesmaids, no last-minute dress steamer. Just silence and a subtle breeze from the cracked window in the corner of my private suite. The birds outside hadn't started yet. The world was still deciding whether today would be chaos or clarity. I stood up slowly, letting my bare feet hit the hardwood floor. My dress hung in the corner. Ivory, minimal, exactly what I had envisioned years ago before Pinterest boards and family votes chipped away at it. I ran my hand along the fabric, then reached for the small ribbon I had sewn into the inside seam just last night. Black, simple, not for mourning love, but for honoring the part of myself I had buried to keep everyone else comfortable. Today wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming something that had been mine all along. I dressed deliberately, no rush, no apologies. And when I looked in the mirror, I saw someone I recognized again. The venue filled quickly. I stood behind the door to the ceremony hall, watching people file in. They laughed, clinked glasses, complimented centerpieces. It was like nothing had happened. Like the previous week had been a strange blip they could easily scrub away. But some stains don't lift. The wedding planner scurried by, clutching a sealed folder. "This was handed to me by your lawyer's assistant. They said you'd know what to do with it." I nodded once. She paused. "Should I read it aloud?" "During the opening remarks," I said. "Like an introduction." Her brows furrowed, but she nodded. "Understood." She didn't understand. Not yet. The doors opened. Music played. Guests turned. But there was no bride. Not yet. Instead, the planner stepped forward, folder in hand, and began reading. "Today, we gather not just to witness a union, but to remember the foundation that marriage is built upon: honesty, trust, and transparency." She paused, glancing at me off stage. I gave a small nod. "Before we continue, a statement must be shared. It contains information that affects the validity of the events preceding today." The room shifted, heads tilted, murmurs started to bubble. The planner continued. This document includes evidence of financial misconduct by the groom, Ilario Hernandez, and intentional misrepresentation by Roxalana Lee regarding the structure of estate trusts and family inheritance. Gasps. She opened the folder, pressed a button on the speaker panel, and let the recording play. Roxalana's voice, crystal clear. He'll never see it coming. Audrey is so obsessed with fairness, she'll trip over her own grace trying to stay civil. And then Ilario's. We just need to make it to the ceremony. Once the paperwork finalizes, her share transfers. The room went silent. Mahola stood up from the second row. Let it play, he said simply. She deserves her moment. The audio continued. Roxalana mocking my handwriting. Laughing about stealing the altar in heels. People began to shift. A few stood up. Someone near the back whispered loudly, "Are you kidding me?" I watched it all from the threshold, not hiding, observing. When the audio ended, there was no applause, just dead stillness. Then the doors opened again, this time from the back. Two uniformed officers stepped inside. They moved through the aisle, straight to the altar. Ilario Hernandez, Roxalana Lee, you are being served with notice of a pending fraud investigation. You are not under arrest today, but further obstruction will result in immediate action. Roxalana's face turned chalk white. She stumbled back a step. Ilario tried to walk away, reflex. The officers moved in, blocking his path. The planner, bless her, didn't faint, just adjusted her clipboard and stepped aside. I took that as my cue. I walked down the aisle, not in a rush, not in fear, but with clarity. No bouquet, no veil, just me. I stepped up, took the mic from the stand. People turned. Many looked away. Some met my eyes. To those of you still sitting here, I began, thank you. Whether you supported me loudly or sat quietly, at least you didn't lie. No one dared speak. This wasn't the wedding I planned, I said, but it's the truth I deserved. I looked at the bouquet someone had left by the pulpit. I picked it up, then dropped it. The sound was sharp, clean. I turned and walked away. Outside, Cassiopeia waited, engine running. She opened the door without a word. I climbed in. As we pulled away, I looked out the window one last time at the venue. The building was still pretty in the afternoon sun, still dressed for joy, but I was done dressing for anything but truth. Let them clean up the mess, I whispered. I already cleaned up my future. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my lawyer. Want to talk next steps? Because the trust is back in your name. The day after the ceremony that wasn't, I walked through the front door of my childhood home and was met with a silence so sharp, it felt physical. I'd walked into this house hundreds of times, after sleepovers, football games, first dates, but never had it felt so unfamiliar. The framed photos on the wall had shifted. Some were missing entirely. A few remained, but I noticed the pattern instantly. There was no trace of me from the past 2 years. No engagement photos, no family holiday pictures where I had been front and center. Even one old graduation shot had been replaced with a landscape of the marsh. Honora was in the kitchen, washing a pot. The faucet ran louder than usual. She didn't look up as I stepped in. I didn't announce myself. I didn't have to. You learn who your family is by how they hold space for you, or erase it. I wandered into the linen closet to grab the blanket I had left behind last week, and that's when I saw it. A faded album shoved underneath old tablecloths and mismatched napkins. I pulled it out, curiosity humming just under my skin. Inside, among the curling photographs and cracked plastic sleeves, was a picture I didn't recognize, Honora, and a woman who looked eerily like her, arm in arm, smiling, in a church parking lot. They wore matching corsages. I stared. Her name was Lydia, a voice said behind me. I turned. Honora had come into the hallway, drying her hands. "You told me she disappeared," I said, holding up the photo. "She didn't," Honora replied quietly. "I asked her to step aside. I was marrying your father, and there was a conflict. She was engaged to someone from his family. It would have made things complicated." "She gave up her wedding for yours?" Honora looked away. "It made sense at the time. She never came back after that. Sent a card every few Christmases. Then she stopped." I swallowed. "So this isn't new?" "No," she whispered. "It's not." "When sacrifice becomes expectation," I murmured. "It's not love. It's survival." Honora didn't argue. She just stood there. I waited for an apology. It didn't come. So I nodded once, tucked the photo back into the album, and walked upstairs. There was nothing left to say. That evening, back at the suite I'd rented, I folded each dress with care. The white one, the rehearsal dinner one, even the silk robe I never got to wear. It all went into boxes, not because I needed to erase the memory, but because I was reclaiming my space. My phone buzzed intermittently. Texts from cousins, old friends. Messages that said, "Thank you for standing up," and "You were never the problem." Some were short, some paragraphs long, none from Mom. Then, one from Dad. "The papers are finalized. The trust is yours again. No conditions." I didn't reply. I sat in the quiet, listening to the sound of tape sealing a box. Justice doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes, it's just your own voice echoing back to you, without tremble. The next morning, I returned to the house one last time, just long enough to pick up what remained. A note had been slipped under the door, folded once. I recognized the handwriting instantly. "I hope someday you'll understand." I read the line, then folded it again and left it on the kitchen counter. Underneath, I scribbled one sentence on a yellow sticky note. "I understand more than you think. That's why I'm leaving." I placed my childhood house key beside it and walked out. There were no tears, no dramatic doors slamming, no voices raised, just the soft click of the mailbox closing as I dropped the key inside. Later that afternoon, I drove east. The cottage I had reserved sat along the edge of a quiet shoreline, facing the Atlantic. No neighbors, no planner, no guest list. The kind of place you don't run to, you return to. I stepped out of the car, took in the salty air, and whispered to no one in particular, "Goodbye didn't hurt this time. That's how I know it's right." I woke up to the sound of waves tapping against the shoreline, their rhythm steady, unbothered. The light seeping through the sheer curtains was soft and forgiving, unlike the weeks that preceded it. For the first time in what felt like months, I didn't have a calendar reminder screaming at me. No rehearsal times, no confirm vendor alarms, no voices needing answers, just the seagulls and silence. I padded barefoot across the cottage floor, letting the wood cool my skin. The kitchen was tiny but warm, like something out of a retirement dream ad. I made coffee slowly, taking in the simplicity. No planner beside me, no call sheets taped to the fridge. I sat on the porch with my mug, wrapped in a worn sweater Cassiopeia had packed for me. I didn't check the news, didn't scroll through messages. My phone buzzed once. A calendar reminder popped up. Call with attorney. 9:00 a.m. Peace isn't the absence of sound. It's the absence of apology. I stepped inside, connected to the call, and waited. "Morning, Audrey," the lawyer said. He sounded chipper, like this wasn't a cleanup job after a family implosion. "I'll keep it brief," he continued. "You've been reinstated as the sole name on the family trust. Turns out, despite what you were told, your name was never legally removed. Roxalana forged documents. Ilario supported it. But Mahola made sure the clause remained intact. I sat with that for a second. All of it is back under your control, he said. Funds, properties, the original succession, untouched, the narrative they gave you, false. I didn't cry. Didn't thank him profusely. Just said, "Thank you for confirming." He cleared his throat. "One more thing. I don't usually say this, but you didn't lose your power, Audrey. They just kept pretending it wasn't yours." After the call, I deleted the wedding planner's contact, then every email thread labeled bridal. No fanfare, no ceremony. Just the sound of finality. By mid-afternoon, the quiet of the coast had become home, but the rest of the world hadn't stayed quiet. A financial journalist picked up the story after a vendor, disgruntled by unpaid invoices, leaked paperwork. The article ran with the headline, "Bride Betrayed, Inside a Southern Scandal of Trust Funds and Falsehoods." It was polite enough, scandalous enough, and thorough. Roxalana was invited to step down from her PR firm. Ilario's accounts were frozen pending a full audit. Mahola issued a public statement through a family attorney, concise, unemotional, but clear. All legal property and estate interest belongs to Ms. Audrey Lee. I offer my full support. People reached out, interview requests, podcast inquiries, even a book agent. I declined everyone. Instead, I posted a single message on my personal page. They tried to rewrite me out. I rewrote my ending instead. That evening, a small envelope arrived, slid under the door. From Honora. The handwriting was hers. The paper, thick and cream-colored, the kind she used for formal announcements. I opened it, read the first line. I thought if I gave Roxalana the spotlight, she'd finally stop needing it. I didn't read the rest. I placed it on the kitchen counter, untouched beyond that opening. Then I grabbed my own paper, wrote a sentence, and tucked it into an envelope. "It's not your guilt I need. It's your silence I've outgrown." I walked to the mailbox, slipped it in, and closed the door behind me. That felt like the final lock clicking into place. Later that night, I lit a candle, poured a glass of wine, and opened my laptop. A blank document blinked back at me. I titled it, "Inheritance, the Things I Chose to Keep." I didn't write anything yet, but I smiled, because this story, it would be mine. I didn't just survive them. I outlived their version of me.